Share with you as I close is this, and it's something you've already recognized. Here we are in a Republican primary. And when people stop and consider how the country's gotten in the situation that it's gotten in here recently, you can't deny the fact that the Republicans, for the most part, have controlled every level of government. We may not have had the party majority like the Democrats now enjoy in Washington, but we held the presidency, the Congress, the Senate, the state legislature, the governor, the Supreme Court, and otherwise. Something went awry, didn't it? Because when those Republicans were at candidates' nights, and when they were at our Lincoln Day dinners and our Republican activities, they said all the right things. They made me believe they meant less government, less regulation, less taxes. They made me believe they could be trusted, and something happened. When they got to Washington, they did just the opposite. As you consider who you choose to represent you in Washington this time around, I would ask you to look beyond our ability to memorize Republican bullet points, my ability to study the Heritage Foundation website and regurgitate it to you tonight. And I would ask you to look for the candidate that you honestly believe will have the courage and fortitude to stand up not only to the other side, but to his own party at times to move the country forward. What America's looking for is men and women who understand the role the government is to play in our lives. We don't need people with more experience. We had a United States Senate made up almost entirely of successful millionaires who'd been greatly successful in their personal business ventures, who'd been greatly successful in their entrepreneurial activities and their nonprofit activities, and yet the balanced budget has never come. They continue to act in ways that defy common sense. It's not experience and it's not education that is lacking in Washington. What is lacking you have too many politicians who no longer understand the role the government is to play in our lives, but who also would rather get elected and do what's necessary to get the next big campaign contribution than be your true voice in Washington. I will not have the most money in this campaign. I think most of you probably know that by now. But we'll have enough to get our message out. And I'm convinced that when I get out and shake your hand and you and I get the chance to talk, you'll see that this isn't a whim. I just don't want to be part of the crowd. I actually think there's a nation that needs saved. A nation that needs saved from the forces that seem to be discarding the very principles that made it great. Individual freedom, personal responsibility, hard work. Not only that, but a belief in the fact that those rights did come from a creator. At one of the first forums that Jim Renacci and I attended, someone in the audience asked an interesting question. They said, what will it take to heal America? The truth of the matter is, there's no law I will pass if I'm your U.S. congressman that will fix your country. We can make changes, but in the end, we must be seeking to live by the principles of the Creator if we want to see America prosperous for years to come.
Thank you, Matt. Jim? You know, it's interesting because we're all here this evening, and I want to thank everybody for being here this evening and listening to the four candidates. But we're all here for a reason, and that's one reason is to remove John Boccieri. Because John Boccieri went into Congress with an idea, and clearly he's voted 94% of the time with Nancy Pelosi. He doesn't represent this district, and clearly we need somebody who can represent this district. So when you consider the choices who will go up against John Boccieri, you really do need to consider all the experience that person has. And you know, if you ever were going to hire somebody in a job, do you hire somebody without experience or with experience? What I bring to the table, and I've said this all along in all my campaign meetings, I bring to the table 27 years of balancing budgets. I bring to the table 8 years of some very tough times at the city of Wadsworth, balancing an $80 million budget where you made decisions that didn't make people happy. And you made decisions that in many cases made people mad. I told people when I was mayor, I ended up with more enemies than friends. But the reason you end up with enemies is because you're willing to stand strong and make strong decisions. Now the other thing, when it comes to raising money, it's part of the game and you have to do it. But I always say that if a guy gives me $1 or $2 as part of this, those are people that support you, whether it's $1 or $2. And I always said when I was mayor of Wadsworth, the dollars that came into the city were the most important dollars, and I would stand behind and make sure that those dollars were always spent properly. And I think that's what you need to do. You need to look at the candidates and make a decision, number one, who can beat Mr. Boccieri in November? Because ultimately, that's important. The second thing is, who most represents your values? We all stood up here and talked about very similar values. We're all very conservative, as you can tell. We have a lot of similar values. So then you got to step back to the second phase, which is who represents me and can beat Mr. Boccieri, but also who has the experience to make those tough decisions that can stand up against either side of the aisle in Washington. Look, I've done it in my personal life, I've done it in my business life, and I've done it in 8 years in government in Wadsworth. So what you need to do is really look to the experience of all the candidates up here and make the decision, if you agree, that the experience of what you've seen with the candidates, experience that I have, the 27 years, is what we need to get down there and get America back on track. I'm not running, in many cases, you've heard this, I'm not running because I need this job, I'm running because I want to serve my country. And I want to bring America back to what it should be. And I'm going to do whatever I can to represent the 16th district and make sure that all of you are represented and not Nancy Pelosi representing you. And I look forward to having that opportunity. I hope I can gain your support, and I hope I can get a vote from every one of you. Thank you very much for being here today.